All right. So today on the Miami Valley Experience, we are going to be discussing buyer agency agreements, which is a form that is signed between a brokerage and a buyer, and it gives a realtor the right to exclusively represent a buyer. I'm Jonas Helbert. I'm the broker owner of Streetlight Realty, and this is,
I'm Katie Masters,
there you go,
agent.
extraordinaire.
I'm the amazing.
There you go. So before we start breaking down our board ratified or board written contract that we have for a buyer agency agreement, do you use them, Katie?
I do not actually. I have never ever used that document, buyer's agency.
So you might be learning some things about it as well. I also do not use buyer agency agreements. I will say everything, or not everything is an absolute. So with that being said, there are times when I have turned around and asked a buyer to sign one after working for some time, and we'll kind of get into that.
I did that once, as you know.
Right. Yeah. That we've had maybe two situations, but definitely one in recent memory that either one of us can recall.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just kind of quickly go over the form here. So this agreement would be written between a realtor and a buyer or a set of buyers. There is a time period, so a retainer period, in which the buyer would agree that if they were to buy some real estate, they would be working exclusively with this company, agent, and then there would be an expiration date. So the second part of that is the first section of the agreement. The second one is the broker's obligation. So it says brokers agree to use due diligence and professional knowledge and skill in locating property, meeting buyer's criteria, and shall act for the buyer's interest in negotiating the terms and conditions for the purchase of property. We'll touch more on this here in a little bit, but I think that's extremely vague as to
Mm-hmm.
what the broker's obligation is. If my obligation is simply to be professional, do due diligence, and locating property, which is mostly automated at this point, there's not a lot that I'm required to do to uphold my end of the deal. The buyer's obligation, it says during the agency period, buyer will deal exclusively with broker with respect to all inquiries, showings, proposals, and offers related to the buyer acquisition of any property. Any offers made by buyer during the agency period shall be made through broker. In addition, any offers made by the broker within X amount of days after the expiration of the agency period with respect to properties which broker brought to buyer's attention during the agency period shall be made through the broker unless buyer is then represented by another broker as buyer's agent. If any offer which buyer is required to make through the broker is accepted by the buyer, the broker shall be entitled to the fee specified below. This agreement does not obligate buyer to make an offer to buy any property. So you're not obligated to buy anything, but it does say if you do, then Section 4 kicks in, which is a brokerage fee. Now, I'm going to touch on it just for a second before going into that. But as Katie, as you know, buyer compensation has been pre-negotiated through the listing agent. So a listing agent during a listing appointment, hopefully you can't hear my huskies, but when you're in a listing appointment, you may agree to list a property for 5%, where maybe 3% goes to the listing agent, 2% goes to the buyer's agent, or 2.5% and 2.5%, or maybe you do it at 6 or 7%. And that's all predetermined. The listing agent says, hey, I will give up a portion of my commission to a competing brokerage if they were to bring a buyer. And that's typically how we get paid. What this buyer agreement does says, hey, I will supersede whatever is in here. So as an example, let's say you write on a property and the listing agent negotiated to give you 2%, but the buyer broker fee in your buyer agreement is 3.5%. You would be agreeing to bring an additional 1.5% to the closing table to pay for your buyer's agent. Dual agency. This is section 5. If buyer contemplates the purchase of property listed for sale by broker or owned by an employee or agent of the broker, broker shall be considered a dual agent. So it's just kind of explaining that's more continuous efforts. If the buyer makes an offer to purchase any property either during the agency period, during the terminal period with respect to the property, which broker brought to the buyer's attention during the agency period, buyer authorizes broker to provide continuous assistance as buyer's agent to the conclusion of the transaction. Basically saying, if you get under contract during any of the timelines specified in here, if it were to continue after when you're under contract on a property, that service would be continuous. A retainer fee could be required up front. In other words, it's like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and represent you. You're going to pay me 3% upon closing. I'm going to take $1,000 up front as like a down payment, if you will, or a retainer. And we'll get into all that. Fair housing statement. It's pretty much, we have to abide by fair housing, and they understand and acknowledge that. And then the rest is kind of more or less just explaining some other definitions there. So that in a nutshell is a buyer agency agreement. And it's basically saying you're going to pay the buyer's agent X percentage. You're going to work with them for a certain amount of time. And then you're agreeing not to work with anyone else. Do you want to get into why? I did a lot of talking there.
You did.
Do you want to kind of get into why you don't use these? Because it sounds like it would be beneficial to you, right?
Yes. So I personally don't like to use them because when you're building, we're in a business of relationships, right? Well, that's what you.
This is a relationship business.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm building up a relationship with my client. And let's face it, money talks are uncomfortable. We have to have them. But I'd prefer not to put anything like that. I view that as a roadblock between mine and my client's relationship. So, how would you feel if you're going to buy something and somebody says, hey, before I do anything for you, I need you to sign this document promising that you're going to pay me money. And a lot of people present that prior to having any kind of rapport, or, they go out one time and they're like, oh, I got a document for you to sign. And I've heard that before. Like instantly we go out one time and then you sign this agreement and you're saying that you're going to work with me.
Not to cut you off here, but I'll probably forget. Let's not confuse that with the Consumer Guide to Agency, because the state of Ohio does state if we have any meaningful conversation or a meeting of any type with a buyer, they are required to sign a Consumer Guide to Agency.
Yes.
Two different things. The Consumer Guide just says, hey, here's a set of definitions. What is a brokerage? What is agency? What is dual agent? And you just sign that acknowledging, hey, I was handed a disclosure. You could sign that, turn around and go, I don't like Jonas. He's too loud. He's annoying. He's got an ugly beard. I'm going to go work with someone else. Consumer Guide would not prohibit that. So it's okay to sign that. But I imagine there are probably agents, and I don't want to accuse anyone, but I could see this happening, saying, hey, this is something you have to sign. And it's not. Talking about the exclusive right to represent. Disclosure, yes. This agreement that we're talking about, absolutely not. But you're right. It would come up when you don't even know the person.
Yeah, that's different, though. That's not saying, hey, you're promising to pay me any kind of money. This is informing you about all the different relationships that are in real estate when you're with your agent. So personally, I just don't like it. Like, here's the thing. Like, we know that, like you said, a listing agent splits their commissions and gives us our fee. I feel like personally that when I'm building relationships with clients, that they're going to keep working with me because they either like me, and if they don't like me, that's just asking for a disaster, which I've never had that happen, by the way. Everybody likes me. So far.
That's the same reason why I don't use them. I prefer the old school handshake thing where I explain everything to you. I can show you any property on the MLS. It doesn't matter who it's listed with. There's no reason why I wouldn't be able to show you a property. I even explain exclusive right to represents, right? I'll tell them like, hey, there's this agreement that's out there. I don't ask anybody to sign it. If I suck at my job, I deserve to be fired. There should be no obligation on my end or on your end to be forced to work with me. If I'm not doing it, if our personalities don't mesh well, by all means, you should be able to move on. But then we do ask for some of the same things, right? Like, hey, if you are going to work with me, do me a favor and don't shop and work with multiple realtors. I do not get paid. You do not get paid. We do not get paid unless we get to the closing table. It is important for us that there is some trust there, right? We don't need legal loyalty in the form of an agreement, but it would be nice to just have the trust to know that you trust us and that we are doing our job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the only time, coming back to trust, that's the only time we've ever brought up using that is when we found out that we were being used for showings.
Correct. And in recent memory, I know I've had it happen more than once, but more recently, there was a situation where I can't remember. Did the realtor let us know? I can't remember. Or maybe the buyer even let us know. But either way, it was the buyer. Okay. But the point was, we were just we even told them like, hey, we don't typically use this, but in this situation, we're more than happy to continue working with you. But in order to do so, you would need to fill out this form. And we did ask for a retainer.
Yep. It didn't, we parted ways, which we were okay with going in.
No animosity, not angry or anything like that. It is what it is. Now, I will say there are some pros to using this form, almost mostly on the buyer's agent side, right? You avoid situations like the one that we just talked about. But if you were a buyer and you really wanted to work with a specific agent who refuses not to use this, one, I want more obligations from the broker. What are you obligated to do? If I show you a property this morning, are you going to show it to me this evening? What is your turnaround time for me presenting a property to you that I want to go see and you have to show it to me? How many times of you not being able to get me into a property and it going off market before I can fire you? Are you going to ignore my calls in the evenings, on the weekends? Do you work those days? What is your obligation? What are your business hours? When can I demand that you're going to get back to me? If I call you,
sorry, go ahead. No,
I was just going to say, if I call you this morning, do I get a call back in 24 hours?
So one of the
good.
I keep interrupting you. I thought you were done.
I think there's just a slight delay, but go ahead.
One of the very first questions I ask the client that I'm going out with, what times are you available? Even in the future, for future showings, what time? And if it's 2:30, if it's 5:30, I always try to keep that time frame vague, even with my other clients. And usually it works out fine where if somebody wants to go usually at 5:30 because they get off at 5, or maybe somebody's a 7:00er. I really do try to schedule and organize my clients in that manner so that I can go typically same day. And the only time I really can't, or you really can't, that I can think of that we can't go same day is when it's an appointment required. There's sellers that live there, and they can't get us in to the property. It's not a us thing. It's a seller thing.
Yeah. And I won't say it's never happened to where we wouldn't be able to get through, but yeah, it would be a very limited amount of times when we couldn't accommodate a same day on our end. Like you said, that sometimes they block it out for the day, yada, yada. So
we're in a different situation here, though. I mean, we're lucky, and I think our clients appreciate, since we are a team, they don't just get one agent, they get two agents who, if for some reason you're booked up, I can go. I'm booked up, you can go.
Yep.
So there's usually never that roadblock. If the time is open, one of us can typically be there.
Yep. And, that's why we've not really had to use these agreements. We do a good enough job We follow up. We do what we say we're going to do. So we don't need a contract to enforce that. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do so. But that in a nutshell really is the essence of a buyer agency agreement, why we don't use them. And that's the big thing. If you are going to sign with someone who's going to require it, get some commitment, figure out what exactly they are going to, what they are and are not going to do. That way, if you need to, you can fire them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, because if somebody's not working weekends, I have clients that can sometimes only go on a weekend or even specifically only one day a week. So, and they know when they miss a property, it's because they couldn't go. It's not because we couldn't schedule them. So I don't understand people having, I get boundaries, but in our business, it's why you see all those joking memes like my realtor on vacation and they've got their cell phone or their laptop out.
Yeah.
We're always coordinating with our clients. And like I said, we're in a fortunate position where if you go on vacation, I'm here. I go on vacation, you're here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Now, on the flip side of the buyer agency agreements, we've also got the exclusive right to sell agreements. Mm-hmm. Now, these are a little bit differently because the state of Ohio does say if you are going to sell residential property or property of any type, to the best of my knowledge, and you are not the owner, to be able to market and actively sell the property, you do have to have a contract signed, mm-hmm. right? You and I can't just start selling our neighbor's house. Like, oh, hey, by the way, Susie, I got you, $100,000 for your house.
Yeah. So on the selling side, I mean, there is a commitment needed, and that's just because we're not allowed to otherwise promote anything. So it's totally different.
And then, very similar to the buyer broker agreement, the contract is made between the owner of the property and then the brokerage. And then it's the same thing. It's broken up into different sections. The first section is discussing which specific property are we talking about? What is the listing period? In other words, what is the duration? Depending on the market, we typically either do 6-month or 12-month contracts. I think we're kind of moving more towards a 12-month contract because we are, well, for at least the time being, it feels like approaching more of an equilibrium market where houses could sit for several months, and that may become more normal. I'm not saying it's happening yet, but it does seem to be trending in that direction. What is the sales price? What is the broker compensation? And I'm going to take a moment to break this down. We touched on it during the buyer broker portion, but when we are in a listing appointment, and I, as the listing agent, am sitting with the home sellers, we are having a conversation about our commission. Let's say we agree to list a property for 7%, and we agree that 3.5% will go to the listing agent and 3.5% will go to the buyer's agent. What we are saying is if I, the listing agent, bring you a buyer and we get that under contract using our own marketing or however they get to us, we would collect 7%. But if a competing brokerage, for example, we're not as good at realty, were to bring us a buyer, we would agree to pay them 3.5%. So it's not in addition to the 7. It would be 7 cut in half. We retain half, they have half. Or we could do it 4-3 or 3-4, whichever way you'd want to do it. That can all be negotiated, but that's all covered under the brokerage fee. A second portion of this is the consumer guide to agency. Again, that is a state required form. We're having a conversation about real estate. You'd be required to sign that, even if you don't sign with them. Dual agency, this is something that we try to avoid. There are certain situations where it makes sense. We have known relationships with both parties or something like that. But again, we usually try to avoid it because really it minimizes the amount of advisory we can provide to either party. We can let you know all your options, but then we can't really recommend like, hey, you should do this to counteract what they just did. We can just simply let you know what the options are and kind of help facilitate and make sure all the paperwork. My dog hit my guitar.
Hey, my dog was barking. So
there you go.
What do you do?
I love working from home.
Yeah.
I'll be doing a lot more as the winter sets in, so I don't have to slog through
Oh,
the snow.
me too.
Owner's representation, that's kind of a given, but if you're not already aware, if you sign an agreement, a listing agreement with an agent, they represent, and their fiduciary responsibility is to you. Sounds silly, but you'd be surprised how many times like a realtor is working for the deal and maybe starts to work for the other side. Like, no, you have to sign off on this. You have to do this. And now I'll tell you this, when I'm on the other side and the agent's doing that, I love it because they're helping me. But their job's to help you, the client.
Their name goes on a little list for you of agents you never want to work with.
Right.
Streetlight.
That's right. Yeah. Let's see. Seller content license. Seller may provide content such as photos, videos to the broker. Seller grants to broker a non-exclusive, perpetual, worldwide, transferable, royalty-free license to sublicense. Reproduce, distribute, display, perform, and create. Basically saying whatever content we take of your house, photos, video, any marketing materials, we're allowed to use that at the broker's discretion, and you are preemptively agreeing to that. Fair housing statement. Again, we're not going to do anything illegal to get the property sold. Lead base paint disclosure. That applies to any home built 1978 or earlier. Electronic surveillance devices. Illegal audio and or surveillance is a felony in Ohio. Owner is advised to consult with attorney regarding the use of such surveillance device under Ohio law, and owner shall be responsible for use of such devices in conformance with the law. And then it says owner does not have surveillance equipment located on the property. Owner understands that under Ohio law, owner cannot use electronic, mechanical, or any other device to listen, record, or otherwise acquire the content of the oral communications of other persons without the consent of at least one party to the communication. Owner agrees that if such surveillance device is present on the property, that owner will turn off any audio feature. You know what? I forgot about that. This applies to all showings, open houses, and any other appointments. Real estate licenses, inspectors, appraisers, contractors, or others are on the property. So basically, it's saying you can't record without people's permission. There are ways around that. One, you fill out this form. So the point we're trying to make about the electronic surveillance is, and they kind of explain it here, in the state of Ohio, if me and Katie are having a conversation, one of us can record because one of us are a party to the conversation. Even though it is your property, the fact that two people would be on the property having a conversation and you're the one recording, in other words, you're not part of the conversations, that's what makes it illegal. But by saying, hey, owner does have this, and then we can always put in agent notes that buyer's agent agreed to be recorded on the premises by going to the, so there we can add verbiage if you.
Yeah, I've run into that. And I'm just like, hey, they've got cameras and they're recording us. So if you like the house, don't say anything.
Right.
If you hate it, say whatever you want.
And then, the authorization of a lockbox, all of that. And then you would sign it. Again, these I think are good for both parties. And again, if you have certain hesitations about the agent, I always recommend that you add some caveats. If you say you're going to hold 5 open houses, I want it in this contract. So if you don't, I can fire you. I don't want to be beholden to this if you're not following through. We have had, and the other thing about the commission that I really wanted to mention in this agreement, if we bring to you a willing and able buyer and we get you under contract for the price that you've agreed to, commission is owed then. There is confusion on that. I don't know anyone who would realistically enforce that instead of waiting till closing. But that is not when you're entitled to a commission as a realtor. You're entitled to it once you bring the able and willing buyer for the price that the seller has agreed to. We have had one situation where we did just that and where we asked for some compensation. We didn't even ask for all of it. We said, hey, $1,000, we've got several months into this. We got photography, we got hard fixed cost, recoup some of that, back out. The seller had a very hard time understanding what the market was like. We spent hours upon hours on pricing, going over all of this, got a property under contract for much more than the baseline we said we knew we could get it sold for. And it ended up appraising much lower and still at the price we said we would sell it for. The seller became upset, wanted to back out. We didn't hold him to it. We didn't fight him on it. We didn't try to go after the commission. We didn't do any of that. We simply asked that we either remain in contract or come to some type of agreement. I've had other situations, and I know Katie has as well, where something happens personally and they need to back out of a deal, health issues, job thing doesn't pan out, right? We are not the type of agents to be jerks and tie something up and try to force you to sell or force you to pay us commission if it's owed. That, again, I literally one time, not even in recent memory, in the hundreds and hundreds of deals that we've been a part of that's fallen apart, one time have we asked for any type of compensation in lieu of the commission that was legally owed.
And there was a reason for that. It was just completely different. The client was angry for irrational reasons, and nothing happened to them other than they just
remember the one house we had, 2 or 3 properties listed for this person, and we told them we could sell it possibly for let's just say, I'm going to make up a number, 30 grand. That wasn't the number, but they agreed to that. And I even at the time told them, like, this is a stretch. Like, I'm not even sure if 30 will do. You may have to go lower. And they turn around and like agree to all that. And then we go to get the paperwork done. And they're like, we're going to list for 130. I was like, ah!
It was, but you texted me like, guess how much we're listing this for? And I was like 5 over what we said. And you're like,
right.
No.
It would be the most expensive house sold in the neighborhood, except this house didn't have walls or floors or anything. Didn't have paint because it didn't have drywall. It didn't have insulation. Like, dude, there was no way. So these, I don't think, one, you have to sign them, but always vet the agent. Like the big thing here, there are a lot of teams where it's like, hey, sign this listing agreement. You're going to work with Jonas, or you're going to work with Katie. And then they turn around and go, oh, by the way, you're actually going to work with Susie. She's been doing this for 2 weeks, but she's on the team. That's not how we do things. If you sit with me or Katie, you know you're getting both of us. And the way we always have tried to do it is whoever takes the lead. In other words, if you talk to me, you're primarily going to deal with me. If I'm super busy or out of commission for whatever reason, I may ask Katie to follow up or whatever. My dog sounds much more dogly than yours.
I'm so sorry. My kids came home and they're talking and we're trying to record this and they absolutely don't care.
Hey, this is what happens when we work from home. But so just, you always want to vet anyone before you sign a contract. Read the entire contract. Ask questions. Well, if this happens, what will you do here? Is there any leeway on this? Can you put it down on paper? That's how we like to do things. And the more transparency, the more honesty, the more less binding the agreement, the more trust you should have, I think. I trust myself enough that I don't have to ask you to legally work with me. I have to have you sign that, but I'll let you out of the agreement and I'll even write it down if that's what you want. So it doesn't matter. The thing we always ask is, can we have a conversation first? I've been fired maybe like 8 times, and I think 2 times they actually followed through and fired me. Every other time we had a conversation, fixed it, and we're good to go. But that's going to wrap it up for,
I said, I don't think I've been fired other than that one situation we had, which was, I don't know, no comment.
Right. But that's going to wrap it up for both buyer agreements and buyer broker agreements. If you guys have any questions, definitely leave a comment. We'll do our best to answer them. So I'm Jonas Helbert, Katie Mastes. We're the Miami Valley Experience with Streetlight Realty. Have a great day.